Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of focused a lot on the players of the NBA, whether it be their free agency, their player movement, different trades being requested, and that's fine. But in today's video, I want to focus a little bit more on the teams, and most specifically some teams that could be making some big moves this coming season. And this is primarily because not only do they have the motivation to, but they have the resources as well to make it happen, whether they have players on good contracts, good young players that other teams could be interested in, or in a couple of different cases, a ton of draft picks as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the list. First up now is the Indiana Pacers, and I've talked about this team in a couple of different videos throughout the offseason, whether it be their what's next video or whatever. And even before free agency, they were in a good position to make some moves because they have Miles Turner, they have Domantas Sabonis, and I don't really know that they're going to continue to roll with both of those guys playing together and being on the same team, and eventually one of them is going to get moved. But even then, once they went into free agency, they got even more ammunition to potentially make a big move. And it's not just the fact that they got someone like Malcolm Brogdon who could be valuable to another team. It's just the fact that all the contracts that they signed this offseason are potentially movable and are valuable players. Guys like Jeremy Lamb, guys like TJ Warren, like I said, Malcolm Brogdon, all of these players are valuable, they have good contracts, and they just fit in well and fit in nicely into a trade, and they're also relatively short-term deals as well. And they also have the motivation to do this because even though I like the moves that they made this offseason, I still have questions about their ability to win a championship or compete for one if Victor Oladipo is their best player and their only all-star. Now, maybe there's some internal improvement, most specifically with someone like Turner or Brogdon breaks out in a new role in Indiana, but I don't really see another all-star on the roster right now. So if one becomes available, I wouldn't be surprised to see them use someone like Brogdon and Turner and Sabonis and Warren and Jeremy Lamb in some kind of combination plus some draft picks to bring in a star. Now, it's tough to speculate on who that might be because, I mean, guys like Bradley Beal are going to continue to be mentioned, and it's always tough because a lot of times we don't really see coming who the next big kind of star player that wants out is. But just kind of spitballing here, maybe Karl Anthony Towns ends up not being happy in Minnesota anymore, and the Pacers are able to throw like Miles Turner plus a couple of those wings and some picks at the Timberwolves, and that gets their attention. But either way, this is a team with the motivation and the resources to make some kind of move happen, and I would be interested to see if that's something they ended up doing because, again, I just think they need one more star with Victor Oladipo to consolidate some of their other complementary options to make them a true championship contender. Next up now is the Toronto Raptors, and there's a couple of different reasons why I wanted to talk about this team. First of all, they're uniquely positioned to take on salary in a potential trade and use that as an asset because they have so many expiring contracts for next season, and because I came up with kind of a crazy trade that I wanted to share with you guys. So basically my thinking here was, how can Washington get out from under John Wall's contract, and could they use Bradley Beal's value to be able to do that? So here's the trade. Now the trade is Serge Ibaka, Norman Powell, Fred VanVleet, Marc Gasol, and a 2021 and 23 lottery protected first round pick from the Toronto Raptors in exchange for John Wall and Bradley Beal. Now the thinking here for Toronto is they keep Kyle Lowry's big expiring contract to maintain some of their 2020 flexibility, and obviously they keep him because he's going to help them on the floor, and John Wall is not going to play next season anyway, so it's not like they're going to butt heads as point guards. And then they go into the summer of 2020 with only 3 players on their payroll, that being Wall, Beal, and then OG Anunoby, which gives them about $50 million in cap space in the summer of 2020. They use some of that money to bring back Pascal Siakam, and then they have significant cap space left over to continue to bring in free agents, and they get a discount on Bradley Beal, a player that's a really, really good trade asset across the league because they're also willing to take on John Wall's contract. They really only give up expiring contracts and then VanVleet, who's a 2020 free agent that they'd have to pay anyway, and then 2 lottery protected first round picks for Bradley Beal, and then maybe even John Wall is kind of good when he comes back from injury, despite the fact that he's on this giant contract. So you get a great player in Bradley Beal, you get a player in John Wall that hopefully is going to be good when he comes back, you get to keep OG Anunoby, you get to keep Pascal Siakam, and then you bring in some free agents. And these are the kinds of moves that the Raptors could potentially make just because they have so many expiring contracts and all their picks available moving forward as well, to where they can kind of retool rather than completely rebuild. Because even though having the cap space is nice, this is more so how I would expect, or at least hope, that they would use it, because they're not really going to be able to bring in any big name free agents, I don't think, with all this cap space. So why not use it this way? And then obviously for Washington, they get out from under Wall's money, they get some future assets for Beal. Moving on now to another team that could be potentially making a big move this season, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans. Now personally, I'm really intrigued by their roster. I kind of want to see what it looks like before they start moving some of these pieces around. I want to see Drew Holiday and Jackson Hayes and Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball all kind of play together and see how all that's going to work. But beyond that, depending on what direction their season goes, they could really go in either direction. If it's not going as well as they hope that it would, they could trade Drew Holiday for even more value, even more future value, and tank, and then have another really good draft pick next year and all these really good future draft picks that they have as well. Or if things are going really well, they can consolidate some of their draft picks and trade for a star like potentially Bradley Beal, or like I said, maybe even Karl Anthony Towns, or any other unforeseen star that becomes available on the market. They have the flexibility to go in either direction, and probably more so than any other team on this list, they have the ammunition, because of the Anthony Davis trade, to go out and get whoever they want. If a star becomes available and they want them, they can make a strong and really compelling offer if they want to, or like I said, they can go the other direction and get future value for Drew Holiday. Now, like I said, I kind of want to see these guys play together first before they start chipping away into these assets, because I think it's going to be one of the most interesting teams in the entire league, but at least having this kind of flexibility is really important for them. Second to last now is a team that has made these kinds of lists for the last 3 to 3.5 years, and it's the Boston Celtics. And even though a lot of things have changed for them, Kyrie's not there anymore, Al Horford's not there anymore, they're going to have to pay Jaylen Brown next summer, they're going to have to pay Jason Tatum in 2 summers, they still have the assets and the ability, and probably the motivation as well, to make some big moves. Because I don't think right now they're a championship contender, but I think they're probably 1, maybe 1.5 moves away from being one. And again, if a star becomes available, the Celtics are going to be a team mentioned, because even though they've used up some of their draft picks, like the Kings pick that they had, the Clippers pick, they are at least actual players now. And so if they look intriguing, guys like Romeo Langford, for example, they could be used in possible trades, and they still have the Memphis pick protected next year and unprotected in 2021. So if someone becomes available, the Boston Celtics are a team that immediately people are going to look at and say, hey, maybe they're the ones to make that move. Again, whether it's Bradley Beal, whether it's even like Draymond Green in the middle of the season. If the Warriors are like, we don't really want to pay him in the offseason, let's see what we can get for him. Kevin Love, they even talked about bringing in Clint Capella or Steven Adams over the offseason as well. That could still happen. I'm not saying they're going to attach a Memphis pick to those guys' trades, but I'm just saying that they still have the ability, they have the contracts, they have the assets to make something happen. And again, the motivation to, because as bad as things went for them this offseason, they turned it around pretty quickly by bringing in Kemba Walker. They don't really have a 5-man, so that's kind of a need for them. And depending on how good Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum look, they could say, hey, this is still a championship caliber team. It would just make a move or two. So still another team to keep an eye on, potentially making a big move this season. And last up now, of course, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they have just had such a gigantic turnaround in their franchise. And maybe not even turnaround in terms of a positive thing, but just everything has changed for them over the last couple of days as this video is being recorded. They got a gigantic return for Paul George that they really never could have expected, and now they have all these draft picks moving forward, and there's still a Russell Westbrook trade to be made as well, and it seems like eventually he's going to end up on the Miami Heat anyway, and that will probably afford them maybe even a couple extra draft picks or a young player or two. And again, they could use those picks to turn that into a star. They could use one of those picks to dump even more salary like Steven Adams, but they're always going to be in position for the next probably 5 years because of all these draft picks to make some kind of big move depending on how those Clippers picks work out. And they're just another team to keep an eye on. In a similar situation again to the New Orleans Pelicans, where they have a player like Westbrook, and in the Pelicans case, Drew Holiday, that they could still trade, and they have all these assets because they got a gigantic trade return for one of their former best players that's now on a different team. In the Pelicans case, Anthony Davis. In the Thunder's case, Paul George. So again, another team to keep an eye on with the motivation and the resources to make a big move. And I want to be clear that just because a team makes this list doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It's not a prediction video. It's just more of a, hey, keep an eye on these teams kind of thing, because more than most of the teams across the league, these teams have the assets, whether it be contracts or picks or whatever, to be able to make something happen, to be able to interest basically any team across the league if a star becomes disgruntled. And again, it's going to be tough to kind of predict which star that's going to be, whether it's Beal or Draymond or Kevin Love or whatever. And I've done a video on this, or at least one will be coming out relatively soon if it hasn't already. So it's going to be kind of tough to see which star is going to be next, but all these teams have at least put themselves in a position to be able to make that big move if the opportunity is available. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.